Hello, ICT Game Jam.
Game Jam is essentially where people will get together over a period of time and they will build a game in that period of time from start to finish.
Basically, it was a period of 42 hours where they give you a theme and you're just supposed to make a game.
If you're familiar with the startup weekend model or like a hackathon, the idea being that, you know, Friday evening, you show up, start making a game, and then by the end of the weekend, hope to have something playable. A lot of people do, and we like to have the community come in and play those games and vote on their favorites, and we also have a judges panel that comes in.
It's about game developers from Wichita coming together to basically make something great and then learning from each other. You know, it's really, that's what it's about. It's game design.
This is about people in Wichita being pumped about making games and seeing that you can do that here. We all have the same internet as the people in California, right? So what's stopping us?
At the 0 hour mark, you find out what the theme is, and you start brainstorming for, let's say, 20 minutes. What kind of simple game you could make that matches the theme, that turns the theme on its head or interprets it in a cool way. Ideally, you build the core of the game the first night. You say, I've got a minimum viable product on the first night. Then you go home and go sleep for 8 hours, and you come back, and then day 2, you polish it.
So our process kind of started with programming. I kind of white boxed out the gameplay first, just the like the shaft and the frog, just jumping back and forth, and just getting like the rudimentary game mechanics going.
Yeah, I think in the beginning we didn't even know that it was going to be frog or cat related. I think initially when we talked about it, it was going to be like a gelatinous blob that stuck to the wall.
Some people write out, we kind of drew out what does the gameplay feel like? Are there games that it's similar to? Like what's the more like complicated thing? Like what's the one thing where like if we can't get this to work, we need to pick a different game idea?
It's surprising how easy it is to forget, like, how are you supposed to play your game? What about input? What about a user manual? What about a menu screen or some way to like restart the game?
What's our list of these have to make it in, or we should just close our laptops and go play other people's games? And then after that, what are ones where if it gets to be, 10 o'clock on Sunday and we've got a playable build, we can maybe sneak those in before 12. And that's actually what sound effects became. We had a silent game until like 10 a.m. on Sunday.
Doors in the morning will unlock at 7 a.m., so we're told. And they will lock at 11 p.m. No overnighting. I can't stop you from working overnight from your own homes, but it's a bad idea. Bad idea. It hurts.
This year, I think we took the first night and we maybe called it a night at like 10 o'clock. Got some sleep and hit it hard on Saturday. But it's towards the end when everyone really starts sweating, and I remember we had 2 minutes left before it was due, and Andre decided to put in a high score element, and I just remember him like coding while I was over his shoulder, like, we don't have enough time, and he was, we do.
There is an intense state of crunch when you are in the last hour of your game jam. You might begin dropping things in large chunks. You might say, I can't make this work. See you later. And that can be rough if you have a teammate who's been working on that the whole time.
It's definitely not uncommon to have folks where I didn't have something playable until like 2 hours ago. We have some folks where, yeah, it just doesn't pan out. Either they tried to do something too big, or they really were just that new at it, or the idea they had was so complex that they had a lot of good work there, but 48 hours just wasn't enough.
On Sunday morning, we were pretty confident. Like, we had a game that was playable. Everything else was just like adding little touch-ups. There were some things though in the last hour that we were like, oh, I hope we get this in.
You want to add everything extra that you can, but every time you do that, you risk totally breaking your game in some way that you won't be able to recover from.
There were some teams where you saw that they knew the tools, they had an idea, and maybe around like middle of the day Saturday, they're like, I don't know if this is gonna work, but they found that out. It was just a matter of like, okay, what features will actually make it? And it's cool to see the spread.
All right, time.
You can, if you need a minute to finish something, you can have it, but otherwise you should be done. You can do builds of your game now, you can upload screenshots if you haven't done that already, but no more work on the game, no more polish.
You will get judged on what you built, right? Maybe you start with the game engine, maybe you start from scratch.
We try to keep it vague, and we try not to tell people exactly what we're looking for. Because, first off, we don't have something we're exactly looking for, and secondly, because if they knew, they might build a game exactly to match the judge, and that's not what we want. We want to explore everything.
You're going to be looking for what the best game is, which is kind of an obvious statement. But what I mean by that is I'm not necessarily going to be looking at what's the prettiest game. I'm not necessarily going to be looking at what runs the best. Although if those features are important to your game, that is what I will be looking at. If your game is primarily a visual experience, I will evaluate it on that metric, right? So I will try to judge things for what they are trying to be.
In the end, it's still like, is it a game? Is it fun? Is what is it doing? And is it doing it well?
Hey everybody, I'm here to deliver a verdict, and I'm announcing the community vote first because several of the games that were picked by the judges are also in it, and I wanted to show that the community agreed with us first before I said anything. And the number one pick by the community was La Luz by Shocker Static.
La Luz, as it's titled, means the light in Spanish. And it's about a faceless character which is meant to basically emulate with you, the player, so you better basically immerse yourself in the game. It's a very intuitive game where there are no instructions, there is no mini-map, and you are just meant to literally pick up the controller and just start playing.
Personally, I may be biased, but I thought our game was like one of the best ones there. And so I think it was really cool that a lot of other people agreed.
I mean, there were people that were coming up while they were testing the game, like, oh wow, this is an actual game. Like, you could put this on your phone and this and that. And that was really, it felt good.
La Luz, that's why they won, because their game looked so awesome. It had great effects and it was 3D, and that goes a long way with the community vote. I think that the judges had some other things that they were looking for in addition to how good a game looks. You can always see some subtle differences between the community vote and the judges vote, and I think a lot of that usually comes down to how the game looks versus how it feels and works.
And first place from the judges goes to Up Frog Down Cat by Quick Draw Studios.
So Up Frog Down Cat is the story of a frog trying to escape a well and fighting a barrage of cats on his way out.
You push one button to jump from each side of the well, kind of like Ninja Gaiden style. And there's obstacles like spikes and giant wrecking balls, and of course the cats. One of the fun things that we did was we implemented a couple of power-ups. One of those was a rocket that you can see on the main screen, has a frog shooting up the well on a rocket, which is always fun. But then we also implemented a sword, which sort of makes you impervious to falling cats, and kind of put a morbid spin on what was an otherwise fun and quirky game.
They were actually, and this was surprising, we didn't realize it till the end, they were the only game that followed the theme of one button to the letter. A lot of people had, buttons as the theme, but they actually built a game where the mechanic was pressing one button. Graphics don't matter as far as if it's fun, right? If the graphics start to get in the way of the fun, if the graphics are, it's harder to play the game because the graphics are in the way, or they don't react like they should. That matters. But gameplay is king at a game jam.
I think my favorite part of the whole game jam was just watching everyone play the game and just seeing people just really enjoy it and just laugh at all the little things that we put in there.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Is it's nice to see Brent and Jim go up and say, this game won, but there was 2 hours before that where we were already happy with the outcome.
Kind of the happy accident of not having just a horde of game developers banging on my door to judge our event is that we end up getting a variety of opinions too, where you have your game developers' context for how they judge a game, and then in the case of Jen from Grinning Goblin, where she runs a gaming tavern, still focused on the same target from a different angle. and it's kind of good to have that flavor, and it really fit at like the esports convention hosted one.
I enjoyed everything from the button pushing Arduino one. I enjoyed dropping bananas on that one guy. Up Frog Down Cat was hilarious. There was swords that were slicing cats in half. It was terrible. Lalu's was gorgeous. In Buttons was one that I really enjoyed how their control scheme worked out, how it felt to play.
The other games were really cool. One thing that was a theme was 2D and side-scrolling. That was something I thought was really cool, how many different ways people could make 2D side-scrollers.
There was one with an interactive board. Like they actually like went home and built this thing with like switches and buttons.
It's not something that we like broadcast necessarily, that hey, you can make tabletop games here, because largely our focus, it's easier to organize for people bringing their own laptops. But yeah, I mean, we've had people where they made like a card game, or they had like, this could be a video game, but I could prototype a card game. This last one was a year of firsts in two ways, where one person brought a Tandy, and then another team brought, a bunch of microcontrollers, like, Raspberry Pis, and they thankfully did all of the sawing and drilling and stuff like that and hammering at home. But they Friday they got their game plan, did all of that Saturday morning, and yeah, it was like two people facing each other, doing like mission control type stuff and twisting knobs and looking at the screen to see like what their instructions are. And we're not going to kick people out if they're not making a game that gets played on a screen. It plays really well into our message of be excited about making games, whatever form that might take. And whether you have a successful weekend is whether you're pleased with what you built at the end.
If you do think, oh, it's only for people who know what they're doing, that's not the case. There are a lot of people who are just spending the whole weekend watching videos. That's, well, inevitably, even if you do know what you're doing, you're always pushing yourself, and so we're all trying and, maybe lighting what we did on fire at the end of the jam. That's okay. The point of the jam is to hang out with people who like what you like.
To be someone who wants to make games is, you're going to have a lot in common with people who just want to play games, but it's a totally different animal. And I'd say that if you're someone who is interested enough and wondering, would I be interested in something like that? That's probably the bare minimum. And we also try to communicate that, like, yeah, it's a competition, there's prizes and all that, and don't beat yourself up, right? Like, you plowed really farther than a lot of people who just say out loud, like, I wish I could work on game development, and don't actually get started. I'm guilty of that repeatedly.
When you do it professionally, as liberally as I use that term for us, it's nice to have like a weekend where you're not working on something that's meant to make money. It's just to like have fun with, and there's no pressure to do anything other than just have a good time.
And now for my final announcement, go home.
For more information on game design, please visit wichita.edu/thisis/mediaarts.